Thank you for joining us, everyone, for another episode of Live by Heart
Today
with your hosts, Dawn Spiegelberg and Wendy R. Wolf.
Hello and welcome to the Live by Heart Today show number 17. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the new world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science, a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and we'll talk a lot about transformation. Today's theme is choosing self-mastery, and it continues our over theme of relationship and staying and being in good relationship. With me for today's Heart to Heart is my co-host, Wendy R. Wolf, Professional Transformation Facilitator.
Hi, Dawn. So glad to be able to talk about this today. We're on a trend now. This is our third time talking about choice and self-mastery. And today I believe we're going to dig very beautifully into how our choices really help us grow the muscle of self-mastery.
That's beautiful. Growing the muscle of self-mastery is something we're going to learn a little more about with our special guest with us today, Frank Forte, an executive coach and author of the book, Agile Mindset Demystified. Welcome, Frank.
Welcome, Frank.
It's great to be here, Dawn and Wendy. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome.
So, Frank, there was a time before you had self-mastery, and now you're along in your journey. So I'll just start with an easy question. How did you get from here to there?
I would say I made it more painful than it had to be. I did start in my teenage years with practicing karate. And I think that started me on the journey of discipline and being able to have self-control and self-mastery. Now, karate dojos are not the most humane places in the world. And so I would get beat by a bamboo stick when I did not do what I was supposed to do. But that introduced me to this idea that I do have control over my body. I do have control over my choices. And that kind of set me on this journey, if you will, to get better at this over time.
How old were you when you started karate?
I think it was 13, 14 years old.
Wow, that's a good time. And then what were your next steps?
I joined the Navy to see the world. As the advertisements used to say. And so I joined the Navy. I grew up in the Midwest, landlocked basically, and I chose to get away from Ohio and joined the Navy, and which was a huge awakening for me about how undisciplined I was and how rebellious I was in basically conforming to every part of my life had to conform to their rules. And, the way I folded my t-shirts, the way I folded my socks, the way I folded my underwear, the way I made my bed, the way I looked at people. If you rolled your eyes, you got in trouble. If you didn't stand straight, you got in trouble. If you stood too straight, you passed out. So, there were just all kinds of opportunities to get feedback from that world. And they were more than willing to give it.
Frank, what would you say self-mastery is?
It's a lot about choice. It's a lot about choosing over and over, and it's choosing to say no to a lot of things. I find myself now choosing to say no to a lot of things, and I was reflecting on your last session around time. And for me, time is simply a coordination mechanism. Time is infinite, right? Time, for me, I get to make a choice every moment, every day, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing. And what I find when I coach executives, it's more getting them to say no than yes. No is a hard word in our society. You know, we think we're going to hurt someone's feeling, but we've got to get beyond that to what is my purpose? Am I on purpose? You know, one of the things that got me through the military was I knew I had a purpose, and I knew I had to choose every day to align to that purpose, or someone would help me get realigned to that purpose. I do a lot of coaching to veterans, pro bono coaching with veterans. And the hardest thing they have to do is transition to, I would call it external motivation to internal motivation. External mastery, right? You were in mastery when you were in the military because everybody was watching you. When you get out of the military, you've got this big world here. And there's nobody telling you what to do 24 hours a day.
So Frank, let me ask you this briefly, just to clarify. You're mentioning that self-mastery has to do with choice, yes?
Yeah.
So when you're in the military and you're talking about folding your shirts, and where's the choice in the military? How did you develop?
The choice is about how I approach those things. I can approach those things with a heavy heart, a grudge. Oh, I got to do this. I'm moaning and complaining, or I can just embrace it. And I can say, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. If I've got to scrub the latrine, which are the toilets, then I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So I get to choose how I do it. They will make me do it, but I get to choose who I bring to the table. Do I bring the person with the grudge, or do I bring the person that said, okay, if I've got to scrub this toilet, it's going to be the shiniest toilet in the whole barracks?
That's a beautiful distinction. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and am I going to have fun doing it? Or am I going to hate? Or whatever. Yeah, and I really have great admiration for people who can let the external, because what you're talking about is the external was helping you get self-mastery. And I don't know if I could have gotten it there that way. I don't know if I put myself in the situation you were, because I'm rebellious too. I'm like, don't tell me what to do. I would have had to like get with the program or break, I suppose. But because for me, I use inner tools, and it just makes it so much easier. So can you talk a little bit more about how the outside in the military helped you along the way, and you saw them help others?
The military has a set of values and standards, right? And so when those are clearly articulated, a lot of religious systems have those as well, and they can help you. But in the military, it was all about duty, right? You didn't lie in the military. You didn't, sugarcoat it. If you did, especially as I moved on to submarines, you could get somebody killed, or everybody killed, to be more accurate. So the external mechanisms showed me a path to saying, what does good look like? And I think a lot of people don't know what good looks like. So they just kind of keep wandering around aimlessly almost. And so the military gave me that advantage. Really, the military comes down to three things: right place, right time, right uniform. And if you can do that, you're 80% there. And I would argue that that's most of life, right? So many people get hired for their skills and fired for their character.
Oh,
yes. Good.
And
good.
By character, you're bringing us full circle to mentioning how you clean the latrine, how you show up for the job. Is that right?
Yes.
That's beautiful.
And we all have excuses, right? We all have excuses why I don't want to do it today. That was never an option. There was like, I was reflecting on a story that I remember. I was on a submarine and I had gotten sick, but it was time for my watch. And I was in my bunk, and what happens is people come down and they shake you and wake you up and said, "Hey, it's time to get up to go on duty." And it was the third time that they had come down to get me, and the guy who had been on watch had been there for 12 hours. He wanted to get something to eat and go to sleep. And so they said, the chief of the boat, pretty highest ranking enlisted person on the submarine, said, he's going to write you up if you don't get up. I literally rolled out of my bunk and dropped 4 feet. And I got dressed and I made it halfway to the coffee pot and I passed out. Come to find out, I had 105 fever. But I was so compelled to get out of bed that I did it. I willed my body to do something that it said, no way, you can't walk.
Yeah.
That's a powerful story. And powerful because you were shown what good looks like. What does good look like when you're on a submarine? And it looks like you get up and you perform your duty.
Yeah.
And you were able to get yourself up and get yourself dressed because that was the standard you set for yourself. And they didn't write you up for passing out, did they?
No. Actually,
right?
I got medically evacuated from the submarine and ended up spending about a month in Balboa Hospital in San Diego.
Wow. So you were you were able to mentally overcome for a brief period of time your illness in order to live up to the standard that you believed was the right standard. And I think that's an important distinction, important for people to understand. When you set a standard, whatever the standard is you set for yourself, keeping it is one of the keys to self-mastery.
Yeah.
And it grows the muscle. So, which brings us to the story that I would like you to tell.
So, into being on submarines for about 2 years, I had the opportunity to go to Navy diver school. And so these used to be in World War II called frogmen, and you'll see movies about the SEALs now, and this is kind of where this evolved from. And so I was selected, and a lot of physical training, a lot of testing. I'm a really good swimmer. I was, even in basic training, I was on the swim team. I was actually selected to go through SEAL training. I declined that just because I wanted to do something else in the Navy. But Navy dive school was one of the opportunities I had. And so, we did a lot of hard PT, and I would literally throw up just about every run we went on because it was so hard. And I was coming off of a submarine, which is very small, 120 men, not a lot of room to run around. So I was probably not in the best shape I could have been. Anyways, so we got pretty far into the process, and they said, "Oh, we're going to teach you drown proofing." And so, oh, cool, they're going to teach us how not to drown. Well, not quite. What they did was they literally showed us what it was like to drown by drowning us.
Oh.
So this was a choice that I made consciously to let them drown me. And it wasn't, they put my head under, no. It took 6-7 hours, because what they do is they strap your legs together. They strap your arms together with Velcro. You can pull it apart if you want to, but then you fail and you get kicked out of the course. And then you bob up and down in a 12-foot pool. And eventually you exhaust yourself and you go to the bottom and you drown. And then somebody pulls you out. And I did have confidence that they wouldn't really let me drown, but there was a choice that I made. At any point they would have, and they were yelling at me, and they, you can't do this, and you're, all the stuff you would see in normal military movies where they harass you. They did all that stuff. And at some point, I woke up, I was on the pool deck, next to the pool, and they were reviving me. So that was probably the hardest conscious choice I ever had to make that I can actually tell you about.
Will you describe for me the conscious choice that you made?
I had a goal. I knew that I had to drown to get to my goal.
So your goal was to drown?
My goal was to become a Navy diver.
Your goal was to become a Navy diver. And the moment that you realized that in order to become that diver, that you had to endure and experience drowning, what went through your mind? The moment you realized you weren't going to learn how not to drown, you were actually going to drown.
I was committed. I literally, the conscious thought was, I'm committed to this, and I hope they pull me out in time. Was kind of the second thing is because, like, I mean, these are competent people, highly trained, and I had gotten to know them. They're, so we had built some rapport, even though it's through me doing a lot of push-ups and sit-ups. That's one way to build rapport. But, it was, I've got confidence in these people. I'm committed to the goal that I set out. And the real challenge was a lot of people aren't. People aren't committed. They make choices too easily. And in your last video, and I'll just go back, Dawn, to you're married. You've made a choice. You're married.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I, look at becoming a Navy diver. I've made a choice to be a Navy diver. So if I have to drown, I have to drown.
I have another quick question. Did you see and watch anyone else go through their dive test before you took yours?
We were all doing it together. So some people went earlier than I did. So we're, think about 20 people bobbing up and down in the 12-foot end of the pool, right? So people would come up, you'd look around, there'd be a few less people. You'd look around and, oh, there's a guy over there on one side and he passed, and here's another guy over on this side and he, tapped out and didn't pass. So you kind of get this whole, and as you become exhausted, your oxygen stops flowing as well, and so you're kind of in this euphoric state, almost like, and keeping control of your mind and just being present.
Yes.
Was one of the keys, because the panic can set in very easily in these situations, right?
Yes.
And so they wanted to see that. They wanted to see if you panicked too soon, if you panic too strongly, if panic overwhelmed you. And that's what I find a lot of people doing, is they refuse to be present in the moment when there's a challenge in front of them.
Yes.
And then things go south.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a beautiful visual, because at first I was imagining that it was just you in the pool, right? And then all the people were outside the pool watching just you, but that wasn't the case. It was all of you going through it at the same time.
Yep. I mean, there were probably 20, and I'd say that we lost about 8 people.
When you say lost, would you define what that means?
I mean, they just decided that this wasn't for them.
They decided not to be a dive, Navy
diver. They just decided, this was too much. They counted the cost and it was too high, and they were too afraid of water, or they were, but you think about this, Navy divers are supposed to go out into the middle of the ocean, jump off of a submarine in the middle of the ocean and go fix something on the submarine. So if we can't even do it in the pool, and there's a very good reason they do this, and I think it applies to life. If we can just take a beat, if we can take one more second than we think we have, we often find some clarity. So that's what they were doing through this exercise. They said, if you know what it's like to drown, then you will possibly have a few more seconds to figure something out and not panic. Because when you panic, it takes away all your air.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to life as well. It applies here on, when we're breathing, but panic actually shuts us down.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frank. With that, we're going to take a brief break and thank our sponsors.
And thank you to our sponsor for making the show possible. Hooray!
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Live by Heart Today show. And our special guest, Frank Forte, is talking with us about self-mastery and some of his experiences with accomplishing that in his own life. We just discussed having another second, taking one more moment, setting aside the idea of panic, delaying it as long as possible in order for us to keep our wits about us. Frank, I'd love to hear from you just a little bit about what happens when you experience panic. And from your experience with going through and seeing, being a witness of other people panicking, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I've seen it a couple times. I was involved, the first terrorist attack on U.S. soil was at LaGuardia Airport. And it was in 1976, 77. And there was a bomb exploded in the baggage claim area. And I happened to be there. And I literally saw every, the ceiling, the glass breaking, and this huge wave of energy coming at me.
Wow. Were you stationed there?
No, I was just, I wasn't even in the Navy yet. I was visiting my cousins that live in New York City. I just happened to be there at the airport. And
wow.
And I saw everybody just going crazy. They were running. And it's interesting is some people, those events send them off the deep end. They tend to make me calmer. So, if I literally just kept doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was concerned about my cousin because he was supposed to be waiting for me in baggage claim, and that's where it appeared the bomb went off. Everybody ended up being fine. But that was, another example of an environment of, keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. What is the plan, right? In the Navy, they teach you about flooding and they teach you about fire. And they actually flood, we have trainers and they open up all the valves, and there's just no way you can plug all the holes. But the intent is, again, to keep doing what you're supposed to be doing in this crisis, and hope, it's like breathing, right? People stop breathing when they panic. They stop, their frontal lobe shuts down.
Yes.
There's a lot of science about what happens when people panic.
Yes.
They don't assess resources that they might have. And so, especially the folks that in dive training, the folks that were not as comfortable in the water, you literally should be a fish if you want to be a Navy diver.
I believe I hear what you're saying. I don't understand it through my own experience, but I know it's been said that if a lifeguard is going to attempt to save someone who's drowning, they have to be so careful that they themselves don't get drowned by the person who is panicked in the water.
Yeah, this kind of goes over and over. They've got to be so well trained. When I was fighting flooding on a submarine or a fire, if panic entered my being, I was going to get myself hurt and most likely a lot of other people hurt. And I think that's we don't have a high enough standard why not to panic. We need to raise the standard for why is it immature of us to panic.
Yeah. And do you believe that it's a muscle? Do you believe some people come with more capacity than others? Do you believe it's just a gift? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of research in neuroscience about, and I deal with pro bono with folks that have PTS, coming out of the military. And PTS can happen to a lot of people. Typically, it was first discovered and documented, I would say, in the military. And the neuroscientists say that the more secure, the more stable you are, the less likely you are to fall off that cliff. And so the visual that I got is like you start far away from the cliff if you're fortunate, not so far away from the cliff if you're not. And then things happen. And if those things happen, then you can fall off the PTS cliff. And so I do think, and the neuroscience talks a lot about how people are raised, their upbringing. So there's a lot to do with the socioeconomic and demographics and all that stuff.
So now, by PTS, you mean post-traumatic stress, is that correct?
Yes. Now, to go onto a submarine willingly, you've got to be a little crazy to begin with. Because why would you, basically it looks like a big sewer pipe. Why would you do that willingly? Stay there for over 80 days with a bunch of men, which back then it was just men, and literally not know if you're going to come up on the other side.
Right.
Right. So why would someone that's rational do that? So they actually evaluate us to be a little, thrill seeking and those sorts of things. So.
Yeah.
So in our last few minutes, Wendy, I'm sure you have another question to ask.
I have so many questions, but I would like to know how this perspective of self-mastery and choices, have you dealt with this in your book? Is this an aspect?
There's a lot about giving agency to people, right? So it's not just me having, or somebody like me, or working on self-mastery. We've got to help others. So how can we extend our belief, our faith in them, hold those high standards, get those commitments, right? So these are the mechanisms that I've learned to get to some level of mastery. So in my book, I talk about commitment and what that means, and accountability and how important that is, and not making excuses. And, if you can't do something, don't hide it. Problems don't get better with age. Get them out there, right? And then deal with it. So that's probably, I would say, the biggest area of how do leaders help others come to mastery, right? What are the tools? What are the real practical tools that people can use to help others get a handle on it?
Yeah, and this is part of why I feel like we meet so well, because I found for myself that as I come to self-mastery, that's where my leadership starts growing.
Mm.
And what I'm very, very committed in working with others, the very same track. Like, how do I assist others to come into their own agency and then step into their own leadership?
And I talk a lot about leadership, and the one thing I will leave is that leadership is at least 50% self-leadership.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. For our listeners, we have enjoyed our time with Frank Forte. He is the author of the book Agile Mindset Demystified, and it will be available. I'm not sure when, but it will be available soon. Frank, do you know when your book will be available?
It's on pre-order right now, I expect in the next couple weeks.
In the next couple weeks. So keep your eye out for that. And thank you to all those who were here with us today. If this message spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. For more information about how you can live by heart, go to livebyhearttoday.com. Please like and follow this page and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our sessions together. We air every Thursday at 4:44 Pacific time. We'll continue the conversation about relationship next time. So from our heart to yours, and creating a better tomorrow because we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of
Live by Heart Today!
Thank you for watching. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible.